Hi, my name is Chris Young, and I want to tell you about my disability and a new drug that I'm going to start today called Evrysdi. I was born with a genetic neuromuscular disease called Spinal Muscular Atrophy Type 2, and it's sort of like a muscular dystrophy. I never did walk when I was an infant, and I was able to have some use of my arms and hands up until my early 20s. At that point, I lost a lot of ability and was not able to feed myself anymore. I could only type on my computer by poking at the keys with a stick. Eventually, I had to switch over to only using voice control on my computers. And about the only ability that I have left is the ability to push one of three small micro switches that I hold in my right hand. It's connected to a device that I call my ultimate remote, and I will put a link in the description to show you all about how the ultimate remote works. I drive my wheelchair using this joystick that's in front of my mouth, and I just move it around with my lips. It's a custom design mount that I made with a 3D printer. I have a trach that I've had since December of 2016. I have a G-tube that I've had since May of 2016. And I have a suprapubic catheter that I've had since August of 2019. So this new drug, Evrysdi, is one of 3 FDA-approved treatments for spinal muscular atrophy. The first one was a drug called Spinraza, and it was approved in December 2016 while I was in the hospital getting my trach. And it's a series of spinal injections, I think every 3 or 4 months, and it's not very easy to administer. I didn't have very good treatment as I was growing up. Well, I should mention, I'm 65 years old, by the way. And when I was little, they didn't know much about what I had. They didn't have a name for it. I'll get into that a little bit later. But because I didn't have very good orthopedic treatment as I was growing up, we never did a spinal fusion or any of the other kinds of preventive measures that people with SMA get today. And so the idea of injecting something into my spine didn't sound very good. There were a couple of times where I had to have minor surgery, and we talked about doing a spinal block, and the anesthesiologist took one look at my spine and said, "I'm not sticking a needle in that crooked thing. God knows what I'd hit." So the idea of sticking a needle in my spine every 3 months didn't appeal to me, and I was skeptical as to how much benefit I would get from Spinraza, given my age and the fact that I've had this disability for so long. About a year ago, I think it was, a second treatment came out called Zolgensma, something like that. Anyway, it's a gene therapy, and it's only available for children aged 24 months and under at this point. And then a few months ago, this new medication called risdiplam, and then for some reason they decided to rename it Evrysdi, was approved by the FDA, and it's an oral medication. You can either drink it or put it in your G-tube, and you take it once a day, and something that easy to administer seemed like it was something I would like to try out. I've heard lots of claims by people on the internet, in YouTube videos, that they've regained some muscle function after being on the drug for varying amounts of days or weeks. But those were generally people who were younger than me and who had sort of a less severe case than I have. Type 1 is the most severe. Type 2 means that you did not walk as an infant. Type 3 is a later onset version of the disease. But there's still a lot of variability even within the types. For example, I'm a type 2, and like I said, I lost pretty much the use of my arms in my early 20s. I have a friend who is a type 2 who is in her mid-40s, and she's just now starting to lose loss of her arms. So that really can't tell you, just the type number alone doesn't tell you exactly what your ability is or is not going to be at a different stage of your life. For someone like me who's 65 years old and the disease is pretty much wrecked every muscle in my body, I don't have a lot of hopes that this is going to regain me any great amount of strength or ability. But I have heard from older patients who say that they felt like they had better stamina, perhaps they would breathe easier. And if I get those kinds of effects, I'm going to be very pleased. At minimum, I expect it to keep me stable, and that's going to be a great plus as well. Let me tell you the funny story about my diagnosis. As I mentioned, when I was very young, they didn't have any idea what I had. I went to a muscular dystrophy clinic at Raleigh Children's Hospital here in Indianapolis when I was about 2 years old. And they said, well, he's got something called, my parents took me to this clinic, and they said, the kid's got really weak muscles. He can't do much. He can't walk. He can't really crawl. And he's been that way since birth. They said, okay, that's called amyotonia congenita. And we say, well, what does that mean? Well, it's Latin for congenital low muscle tone. In other words, it means the kid's got weak muscles and he's been that way since birth. But doesn't it sound more impressive when we say it in Latin? Pretty ridiculous. It's not really a diagnosis. It's just a fancy way of describing my symptoms. So I never really knew what kind of muscular dystrophy it was. In those days, if you wanted to know the specific variety of MD that you had, it involved all sorts of torturous processes, such as muscle biopsies or hooking electrodes up to your muscles and making them twitch and all sorts of crazy things, and I just never bothered with it. I mentioned I didn't get very good orthopedic care. I did see an orthopedic doctor at that clinic, and then later saw him as a regular patient in his office. He put me in a brace, a back brace that was essentially a corset. It was a cloth corset right from a women's corset shop called the Spencer Corset Company. They had an office downtown and had metal stays and straps and things. And I wore that for many years. When that doctor retired, I never bothered to get another orthopedic doctor. I just let my family doctor treat my ordinary colds and flus and aches and pains, and never really had a specialist in neuromuscular disease treat me my entire life. So fast forward till I was, let's say, in the neighborhood of 40, 45. I don't remember exactly how old I was. I'm doing a Google search one day. I thought, let's try and Google search amyotonia congenita. So, of course, one of the things that comes up is my personal blog that mentions that word. And then there's another one. It's a review of a book on Amazon by a woman who had muscular disease. It's called The Me in the Mirror. I'll have to look up the name of the woman. I apologize. I'll put a link in there. Anyway, it's her biography. And in the description it says she has something called spinal muscular atrophy, formerly known as amyotonia congenita. I go, oh, okay, so spinal muscular atrophy, that sounds like a real disease, not some Latin symptom that doesn't really tell you anything. So I start looking up SMA, and the biographies of people, the blogs and things that I read, these people were living my life. I mean, they matched me so closely it was ridiculous. I knew instantly that's what I had. Now, when I went to college, I went to the local university here, Indiana University, Purdue University at Indianapolis, IUPUI for short, and got a degree in computer science. And my first job after graduation was at the local IU, Indiana University Department of Medical Genetics as a computer programmer. And the doctor, who was the chairman of the genetics department, interviewed me for the job. And he says, "What's your diagnosis?" And I thought, what the hell does he mean? He wants me to diagnose something? I'm a code cruncher. I'm not a doctor, you know. Damn it, Jim, I'm a programmer, not a doctor. Anyway, and he says, "No, what were you diagnosed with?" Oh, okay. Well, I said, "I don't know." I said, "You know better than me. There's a dozen different kinds of muscular dystrophy." And he goes, "Well, don't you want to know which one you got?" And I said, "Well, Doc, when you can tell me which of those dozen different kinds of MD that you can do something about, then I'll worry about whether I got that one or not." And he kind of laughed because I kind of threw it back in his face. Probably could have cost me the job, being kind of smart with him, but he said his real purpose for asking me was to see if I was comfortable talking about my disability, and the fact that I kind of spit it back in his face and put it on him, I was comfortable talking about it. So anyway, I got the job and worked there for a couple of years until things got worse, and I really didn't have the stamina to work an 8-hour day anymore. So that's kind of the funny story behind my diagnosis, is that 25 years later, after I left that job, I went back to that same genetics lab, and they did the genetic testing and saw that, yes, I do have SMA. I have a double deletion of my 7th exon in my SMN1 gene. Even back then, they didn't even call it SMN1, they just called it SMN. And so in those days, they didn't make a big deal out of whether or not you had an SMN2 gene or how many copies that you had. So anyway, when it got time to try to get a prescription for this Evrysdi, I said, you know, I really need to talk to a specialist in neuromuscular disease and make an appointment and get him to do the prescription and push through the paperwork. So I found a neurologist and went to him. He was kind of new in his practice, but he was familiar with SMA. He had treated patients who were on Spinraza, and he was aware of Evrysdi, but obviously the drug was only a few weeks old by the time I saw him, and so he didn't know a whole lot about it. But after talking things over with him, we decided we needed to redo my DNA test. The original one they did with the blood sample. This one we just did a saliva sample, and then they would also check for my number of SMN2 copies, which is important because that can affect the effectiveness of this drug. I make a lot of assumptions that people know how this thing works. This video is mostly for people in the SMA community. I've got blogs for all my other friends who don't know what the hell I'm talking about, and you go read my blogs and I explain it all in more detail. Anyway, so we redid the genetic test, and he also did some liver function tests, because anytime you start on a new strange drug, there's some concerns about, is it going to affect your liver, or is it going to cause liver damage? Not that this is especially known for that, but it's a good idea to do baseline liver function tests and to keep an eye on that. And so then something went wrong with the genetic test. We had to redo it. We did a saliva test instead of a blood sample, and the first one didn't take, so I had to go back and do the second one. And it looked like the process was about to move along, And then I heard nothing for weeks and weeks. And I've been in contact with the PAL from the drug company. It's a patient access liaison or something like that. And a gal named Andrea, who's been really great. She's been very, very helpful in the whole process. It turns out that somewhere along the way, they applied for Medicare, which we knew would not cover it, and then did not apply my secondary insurance, which is Indiana Medicaid. And you have to have the Medicare denial before you can get the Medicaid to pay. Well, when it got the Medicare denial, the process stopped. And it turns out that the woman who was doing the pre-authorization for my doctor's office either quit or got fired, and I got lost in the shuffle. It took lots of phone calls from me to the doctor's office, from the drug company liaison to the doctor's office. We finally got somebody working on it, and it went through really quickly after that. Really surprised us how fast it went. I got a phone call from the pharmacy last Friday, and my first shipment arrived today, Tuesday, January 19th, 2021. So I'm going to link you to a video that shows, it's a video that my friend Bill made, and it's kind of shows some of the assistive technology that I use, shows some of what my capability is, and that'll give you a feel for what my physical capability is now. I don't really anticipate I'm going to gain any ability. I'm like I said, I'm looking for perhaps better stamina, maybe a little better breathing, some things like that. And so I will be posting videos from time to time, updating you on my situation, my experience with Evrysdi, and we'll go from there. One more story that I want to tell you about this experience. I said the shipment arrived this morning. It was in a styrofoam insulated container with cold packs. We unpacked it and put it in the refrigerator. The little box that you see sitting over my shoulder is the box that it comes in. And inside the box is a bottle, and there are syringes shipped with it, and you draw a certain amount out of the bottle into the syringe and then put it in your G-tube. Couple of issues. These little cardboard boxes have a tape seal on them, and the seal was broken. And inside is a little brown bottle full of liquid, and the little ring, little white ring that goes connected to the cap that shows you that the cap has been sealed. It was broken loose. So the way it comes to the pharmacy is as a powder, and then the pharmacist opens it up and mixes it into a liquid and ships it to you refrigerated. And I assumed that the broken seal on the cardboard box and the broken seal on the bottle cap was part of their normal processing, but I wasn't sure. So I went on my favorite Evrysdi support Facebook group and asked the question, and two people said, "Oh my God, no, you should call the pharmacy immediately. That's not right." And another guy said, "No, that's completely normal." Well, I was smart enough to know no matter what they say, you can't believe everything you read on the internet. And by the way, don't believe anything I tell you either. I could be wrong. I don't think I am, but I'm a guy on the internet, so take what I say with a grain of salt. Be a critical thinker. Don't believe what people tell you. That leads to chaos and storming the Capitol and all that crap. Not that this is a political blog. Anyway, I did call the pharmacy, and they said it was okay. So if you get Evrysdi and your box is open and your bottle cap has been opened, I did notice it's not spill or leak or anything. You know, it was closed tight. But for me, they said that was normal. If you have concerns about your medicine, you should always call the pharmacy and check. Don't believe some guy on the internet. So that's about it. I will be back, I don't know, a week, two, however long it takes to post another video. And we will see if anything happens. Any side effects or what my experience is. That's all for now. Hope you enjoyed this video.